The clock is ticking toward the 0 hour, where every hidden secret must finally be revealed to the world. Are you ready for the final confrontation between the shadows of the past and the future? Hit subscribe now and don't miss the explosive reveal today.
The notification came in at 11:47 on a Tuesday night. A 5-star review. Left by a guest named Todd from Cincinnati. Loved the exposed brick in the original hardwood floors. Kieran was a great host. Would absolutely stay again. I sat with my phone in my hand for a long time, reading that sentence over and over. Kieran was a great host. I kept waiting for it to mean something different. It didn't. My brother had been renting out my apartment for 14 months. And until Todd from Cincinnati left a glowing review on a platform I didn't even have an account on, I had no idea. I put the phone face down on my kitchen counter, the kitchen of the house I was renting while my apartment sat 20 minutes away, being watched over by my family. I poured a glass of water. I didn't drink it. I just stood there in the quiet and let the numbers settle into my bones. 14 months. At roughly $180 a night, conservative occupancy estimate, I was looking at somewhere between $60,000 and $90,000 that had moved through my property and into hands that weren't mine. I work in HR compliance. I audit policy violations for a mid-size logistics firm. I spend 40 hours a week reviewing documentation that people think they've hidden carefully. I know how to read a paper trail the way a cardiologist reads an EKG, not just the peaks, but the flat lines, the stutters, the places where the rhythm skips and tells you something is wrong before the patient even feels the pain. I had turned that skill on other people's messes for 6 years. I had never once thought to turn it on my own family. That night, I opened a new folder on my laptop. I labeled it Property. Personal Review. It was the most neutral title I could think of. I started with what I knew. The apartment is mine. I bought it at 27 with a down payment I'd been saving since my first job out of college. My parents called it impulsive. My brother Kieran called it showing off. I called it the first thing in my life that belonged entirely to me. It's a 2-bedroom on the 4th floor of a converted textile building downtown. Exposed brick, original hardwood, tall industrial windows that catch the afternoon light in a way that makes the whole place glow amber. I loved it the moment I walked in. I signed the papers the same week. 2 years after I bought it, I got transferred. My company's main office moved its compliance team to a satellite location 40 minutes north, and the commute from downtown became brutal. I started looking for something closer to the new office, something temporary, just to try it. And that's when my mother called. "Don't rent it out to strangers," she said. "Let us look after it. Kieran needs a place to land right now. He's going through a rough patch." Kieran's rough patches had a way of lasting. He was 34 and had been between things, between jobs, between relationships, between cities, for most of his adult life. My parents covered for him the way parents sometimes do when they love a child more than they understand him, completely and without asking questions. I said yes because it seemed like the kind thing to do. I said yes because my mother's voice had that particular exhaustion in it that told me the conversation would be very long if I said no. I said yes because I genuinely thought it would be 6 months, maybe a year. I did not put anything in writing. That was my mistake, and I knew it even then. But it felt cold to hand my brother a lease agreement. It felt like I was treating family like a transaction. I understand now that the transaction was already happening. I just wasn't the one collecting. For the first few months, everything seemed fine. Kieran sent me occasional texts. Nothing specific, just enough to confirm he was alive and the building hadn't burned down. My mother mentioned him when we talked. He's settling in. He seems good. The apartment is good for him. I visited once, about 4 months in. He made coffee. We sat on my couch, the one I'd bought at an estate sale, and hauled up 4 flights of stairs myself, and he told me about a consulting project he was supposedly working on. I noticed the apartment looked different, not dirty. Actually cleaner than I kept it. There was a small wicker basket near the door with extra towels in it. A little laminated card on the kitchen counter that I assumed was some kind of takeout menu. A smell, faint and deliberate, like someone had recently burned a specific candle to make a space smell like a specific kind of place. I didn't say anything. I told myself I was being paranoid. Kieran had always been particular about his environments. He'd spent a semester studying interior design before pivoting to business, before pivoting to something else. Maybe the towel basket was just his aesthetic. I went home and forgot about it for almost a year. Then Todd from Cincinnati left his 5-star review. I didn't confront anyone right away. That's the thing people don't understand about working in compliance. The instinct isn't to react. The instinct is to document. You don't walk into a meeting weaving accusations. You walk in with a binder. I spent 3 weeks building mine. The listing was easy to find once I knew to look. Kieran was using his first name and a blurred profile photo, but the apartment was unmistakable. The exposed brick, the amber light, my couch. He'd staged it well, I'll give him that. He'd even moved a plant I'd left in storage to the windowsill, where it photographed beautifully. 37 reviews over 14 months. Average rating, 4.8 stars. I made a spreadsheet, every review dated and logged. Cross-referenced with the calendar gaps where Kieran had gone traveling. I knew this because he posted about it. He was an enthusiastic user of social media. He documented his weekends in other cities with the confidence of someone who had no reason to hide anything. While he was in Nashville for a long weekend, my apartment was occupied by a couple celebrating their anniversary. While he was visiting friends in Portland, a family of 4 was sleeping in my guest room. I pulled my bank records next. Kieran had never paid me rent. I'd never asked for it. Another thing I told myself was generosity and now understood was something else entirely. But I wanted to see the full picture, so I went back further. My parents had access to an old account of mine, a joint account left over from when I was in college that I'd never formally closed. I'd forgotten about it, honestly. I checked the transaction history. Over 4 years, $23,400 had moved out of that account in small, irregular increments. Never more than $800 at a time, never in a pattern that would have triggered a flag. The memo lines said things like reimagined loan temp and, once, simply fix. My mother's initials were on the transfers. I sat with that number for a long time. $23,400. It wasn't the largest number in the story. It wasn't even the sharpest pain. But something about the memo lines got me. X-like. It was nothing. Like my money was a courtesy and the gratitude was the transaction. I thought about calling her. I thought about calling Kieran. I thought about all the conversations I'd had over the years where I'd raised something small. A borrowed item not returned, a commitment not kept, and been told I was being sensitive. That family doesn't keep score. That I had so much, and they just needed a little help right now. I didn't call anyone. I opened a second spreadsheet. The moment I actually broke wasn't the Airbnb listing. It wasn't the bank transfers. It happened on a Wednesday afternoon when I was eating lunch at my desk and my phone buzzed with a notification from my building's management app. I still had the app. I never removed it. And apparently, someone had recently re-registered the unit under a new owner contact name for maintenance requests. The name wasn't mine, it was my mother's. I put my fork down very carefully. I pulled up the county assessor's website. I typed in the address. The page loaded slowly, the way those government sites always do, buffering through the bureaucratic weight of public records. The deed still had my name on it. That hadn't changed. But there was a new document attached. A property management agreement signed 8 months ago, designating my mother as the authorized property manager with full access rights. I hadn't signed that document. I had never seen that document. The signature at the bottom used my name, but the handwriting wasn't mine. I know my own handwriting. I've been writing the same slightly cramped, left-leaning cursive since the 8th grade. Whatever was on that page, it wasn't me. I finished my lunch. I didn't taste it. I went back to my desk and I kept working, because that's what you do when you're in compliance and you've just found what might be the most important document in your case. You don't react, you preserve. I called a friend who works in real estate law that evening. I didn't tell her everything, just enough. She told me what I needed to know. A forged property management agreement combined with documented unauthorized rental income combined with misuse of a financial account wasn't just a family dispute, it was fraud. It was wire fraud, actually, because the Airbnb transactions crossed state lines. Todd from Cincinnati had technically made my case federal. I almost laughed when she said that. I didn't, but I almost did. I gave myself 2 more weeks. I wanted the binder to be complete. I wanted every number sourced, every document certified, every timeline airtight. I requested certified copies of the deed and all attached filings from the county recorder's office. I had the forged signature analyzed by a document examiner, a woman who testifies in court cases, who spent 45 minutes on a video call with me explaining the specific characteristics of forgery under pressure. She was thorough and slightly terrifying, and exactly what I needed. I contacted the Airbnb trust and safety team with the listing URL, the deed proving my ownership, and a formal complaint. Within 72 hours, the listing was suspended and I had a case number. Then I called a locksmith. I didn't tell Kieran I was coming. I didn't tell my parents. I booked the locksmith for a Thursday afternoon, drove to the apartment, and stood in the hallway I hadn't stood in for over a year while a technician changed every lock on the unit. New deadbolts, new handle locks, new chain. The locksmith didn't ask questions. I tipped him well. I ticked a notice to the door. It was simple and legal, a notice of revoked access, dated and signed, with a follow-up certified letter already queued from my attorney's address. Then I went downstairs, got in my car and drove to a coffee shop 2 blocks away. I ordered a latte I didn't need. I opened my laptop. I sent 3 emails, one to my attorney, one to the fraud division of the financial platform my mother had used to transfer funds, and one to a forensic accountant who had agreed to review the Airbnb income records once the platform released them under the legal complaint. Then I waited. Kieran called at 6:14 that evening. I watched the phone ring. I didn't answer. My mother called at 6:22, then again at 6:45, then a text. "Fiona, what is going on? Call me right now." My father called at 7:03. I hadn't heard from him in almost 2 months. We weren't estranged exactly, but he moved through family life like background noise, present without ever quite participating. The fact that he was calling told me the 3 of them were in the same room, strategizing. I texted back 1 sentence, "My attorney will be in touch." The next call came from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, it was my mother, calling from someone else's phone. Her voice was the one I'd heard my whole life when she was managing a situation, controlled, reasonable, with that particular softness that was never actually soft. "Fiona, I don't know what you think is happening, but you need to calm down. This is a misunderstanding. Kieran was just trying to help cover the maintenance costs. We were going to tell you." I let her finish. Then I said, very quietly, "You forged my signature on a legal document, Mom." Silence. "That is a very serious accusation," she said finally. "It's a very serious accusation," she said finally. "It's a very serious document," I said. "My attorney agrees." She hung up. The next few days were the kind of quiet that has weight to it. Kieran tried twice to get back into the apartment. I know because the building has a key fob entry log and his fob no longer worked. He stood at the front desk of my building and told the doorman he lived there. The doorman, who had my written notice on file and had been very gracious about it, told him he'd need to contact the owner of record. Kieran left. He came back the next morning and left again. My mother sent a long email. It was the kind of email that people write when they've been up all night trying to figure out which version of events is most defensible. It covered a lot of ground: my mental health, my history of being difficult, a list of things the family had done for me over the years presented as evidence of their good character. At the very bottom, almost as an afterthought, was this: "We have a lease agreement, Fiona. Kieran has rights as a tenant." I forwarded it to my attorney without responding. She called me 20 minutes later. "They have a lease? They might claim to." "Is it real?" "Let's find out," I said. My attorney filed a formal demand letter. Kieran's response came through a lawyer he'd apparently hired in the previous 48 hours, a move that told me he was more prepared for this scenario than he'd ever let on. The lease he produced was clean, professionally formatted. It had a notary stamp. It claimed he'd been paying rent to me directly for the duration of his stay. 3 problems. First, I had never received those payments, and my bank records, certified and complete, showed no deposits matching the claimed amounts, ever, from any account associated with my brother. Second, the notary stamp. I recognized the name. It was a notary who worked out of a UPS store near my parents' house. My attorney subpoenaed the notary's log. The lease wasn't in it. Third, my brother is not careful with metadata. The document had been created in a word processing application that embeds file creation timestamps in the document properties. The file was created 11 days ago at 9:47 in the morning. The lease had allegedly been signed 3 years ago. The document didn't exist until almost 2 weeks after I changed the locks. My attorney sent a supplemental filing with the metadata report attached. She told me later that the opposing counsel went very quiet on the phone when she walked him through it. The meeting with the mediator happened on a Monday. My parents came. Kieran came. I came with my attorney and 4 inches of organized documentation in a black binder that I'd spent a Sunday afternoon assembling with the same care I give to compliance reports at work. My mother wore the expression she always wears when she's decided to be reasonable. Open face, careful eyes, hands folded. Kieran looked like he hadn't slept. My father sat slightly apart from them, which I noted. The mediator opened by asking if we could start with a general statement of the dispute. My mother started talking. She talked about my well-being. She talked about the family's concern for me, my stress levels, my tendency toward overreaction. She talked about how Kieran had only been trying to offset costs, how the money had been minimal really, how no one had meant any harm. She talked for 6 minutes without being interrupted, which I allowed because everything she was saying was being recorded. When she finished, I opened the binder to page 1. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't use the word theft, though it was accurate. I used the words the documents used: unauthorized rental income, forged authorization document, misappropriation of financial account access, fraudulent lease submission. I walked through each item in order: dollar amounts, dates, case numbers, the Airbnb complaint reference number, the forensic document examiner's report, the notary subpoena results, the metadata on the lease. The mediator stopped writing somewhere around the 3rd item and just listened. When I finished, there was a silence that had a different quality than the silences before it. My mother's hands were still folded. Kieran was looking at the table. My father was looking at me, and his expression was the one I'd spent most of my life hoping to see from him. Not pride exactly, but recognition. Something close to it. Kieran, my attorney said, do you want to address the metadata finding? He didn't answer. His lawyer leaned in and whispered something. Kieran shook his head once, slowly, like a person accepting weather. My mother turned to me. She tried the soft voice one more time. Fiona, we can work this out quietly. You don't need to. I'm not interested in quiet, I said. I'm interested in accurate. The settlement took 6 weeks to finalize. I won't go into every number because some of it is still being processed and my attorney advised me not to, but I'll say this: it was not nothing. The Airbnb income was documented, calculated with platform records, and is being repaid with interest. The account transfers are being addressed separately. The forged management agreement is the subject of an ongoing complaint with the county recorder's office and may result in additional consequences I have no control over. Kieran is no longer in my apartment. I moved back in 2 months after the locks were changed. I stood in the entry and looked at my couch, my floors, my amber windows. Someone had cleaned before they left, which surprised me. Maybe they thought it would help. It didn't. But I appreciated the gesture in the way you appreciate something that doesn't change anything. The wicker basket by the door was still there. I threw it out. I repotted the plant that had been moved to the windowsill. It's doing well. I don't know if it forgives me for leaving it in storage so long, but it seems to be adjusting. My father called me about 3 weeks after the mediation. Not from someone else's phone. He didn't say much. He asked how I was. He asked if the apartment still had the light he remembered from when he'd helped me move in. I told him it did. He said that was good. He said he was sorry it took him this long to call. I didn't tell him it was okay because I'm trying to stop saying things that aren't true. But I didn't hang up either. Some things are still being figured out. I have a folder on my laptop now that I made after the mediation. I labeled it Property, Closed. I don't open it very often. I know what's in it. I spent a long time building it, and it did exactly what it was supposed to do. The apartment is quiet in the mornings in a way I'd forgotten. The light comes in low through the industrial windows and turns everything the color of old honey. I make coffee. I sit on my couch, the one I hauled up 4 flights of stairs when I was 27 years old and had no idea yet what I was building. I drink it slowly. It tastes exactly like mine. I've thought a lot about why it took me so long. Not why I didn't act sooner. I understand that part now. But why I didn't see it sooner. And the honest answer is that I didn't want to. Seeing it clearly would have required me to accept something I wasn't ready to accept. That the people I was protecting with my silence were not protecting me back. Not even close. There's a version of loyalty that looks like generosity, but is actually just fear with better manners. I was afraid of being the difficult one, the ungrateful one, the daughter who kept score when family doesn't do that. So I stayed quiet. I transferred money without asking questions. I handed over keys without getting anything in writing. I told myself these were the small costs of being a good person and a family that needed one. What I didn't understand then is that every time I absorbed a cost without naming it, I was teaching the people around me that costs didn't exist, that I was a resource with no bottom, that the well would never run dry because I would never say it had. Kieran didn't become someone who would rent out my apartment and pocket the money because he was born that way. He became that person across years of small decisions, each one made possible because the previous one had no consequence. The forged signature, the fake lease, the metadata time-stamped to 11 days before the mediation. None of that happened in a vacuum. It happened at the end of a very long road that I had helped pave, one unanswered question at a time. That's the part that sat with me longest, not the anger, which was clean and honest and passed relatively quickly. The part that lingered was the recognition of my own role in it, not guilt. I want to be precise about that. What they did was their choice, their action, their consequence to carry. But I made it easier than it needed to be, for longer than it needed to be, because I confused enduring things silently with being strong. Strength, I've since decided, is something different. It's the willingness to see clearly even when clarity is uncomfortable. To name what's happening even when naming it will cause a disruption. To document instead of dismiss. To know the difference between a disagreement and a pattern and to treat each one accordingly. The binder I brought to that mediation wasn't built in a week. It was built across months of quiet, careful, unglamorous work. Cross-referencing dates. Pulling records. Reading the metadata on a document that someone printed at 9,047 in the morning, thinking no one would ever check. That work wasn't dramatic. It wasn't satisfying in the moment. It was just disciplined and slow and necessary. What I want to remember from all of this, what I think matters beyond the settlement and the changed locks in the plant that's doing well on my windowsill, is that clarity is a skill. It can be built. It requires practice and honesty and the willingness to look at uncomfortable things without flinching, including your own part in the story. The apartment is quiet in the mornings now. I sit on my couch with my coffee and I don't feel triumphant. I just feel like myself. That's the thing I hadn't realized I'd lost. Not the money, not the property, myself. The version of me who knew what she owned and wasn't afraid to say so. That's worth more than the settlement, and it doesn't require anyone's permission.